The first cry pierced through the modest cabin like a blade through silence, and Katherine Hayes clutched her newborn son to her chest, tears streaming down her face. It was March 1876 in the dusty frontier town of Silverdale, Wyoming Territory, and she was now both a mother and a widow, two titles she never expected to bear simultaneously at the tender age of 22. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered, her voice trembling as she gazed down at the tiny face, still red and wrinkled from his journey into the world. "Your papa would have loved you so." The midwife, Mrs. Abernathy, a stern woman with kind eyes, busied herself cleaning up. "You should name him soon, Katherine. A boy needs a proper name." Katherine nodded, though no name seemed right. How could she name this child without Samuel beside her? Her husband of barely a year had been taken by typhoid fever just 5 months into her pregnancy, leaving her alone in a town where she knew almost no one, with a small homestead claim and dwindling savings. "I'll know it when I feel it," she said softly, watching as her son's tiny fingers curled around her own. The following weeks passed in a blur of sleepless nights and lonely days. The baby thrived despite Katherine's fears, but the isolation of her small cabin a mile outside of town weighed heavily on her. Samuel had been so certain they could make a life here, convinced that the railroad's expansion would bring prosperity to Silverdale. Now that dream seemed as distant as the eastern Pennsylvania home she'd left behind. Spring rains had turned to early summer heat when the stranger rode up to her property one afternoon. Katherine was hanging laundry, her son sleeping in a basket nearby under the shade of the cabin's small porch. The rider approached slowly, deliberately, as if giving her plenty of time to see him coming. He sat tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered and lean, with a tan Stetson pulled low over his eyes. His horse, a magnificent chestnut quarter horse, seemed almost as wary as Katherine felt. Her hand instinctively moved toward the rifle that leaned against the porch railing. Samuel had taught her to shoot before his illness, insisting that a frontier woman needed to defend herself. "Madam," the rider called out, stopping a respectful distance away. "Don't mean to startle you. Name's Liam Keller." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair and a face weathered by sun and wind, but not unkind. His eyes, a startling blue against his tanned skin, held her gaze steadily. "What's your business here, Mr. Keller?" Katherine called back, trying to keep her voice firm despite her racing heart. "Just passing through. Saw smoke from your chimney." He gestured toward the thin wisp rising from her cookstove. "Wanted to make sure everything was all right. Not many folks live this far from town alone." Katherine stood straighter. "As you can see, sir, we're managing fine." The man nodded slowly, but before he could respond, a cry rose from the basket. Katherine turned immediately to her son, lifting him and cradling him against her shoulder. The rider dismounted with fluid grace that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. "You have a child," he stated, surprise evident in his voice. "Yes," Katherine replied, protective instinct flaring. "My son." Liam Keller approached slowly, keeping his movements deliberate. He stopped at the edge of her yard, seeming to understand her wariness. "Madam, I don't mean to pry, but are you out here all alone with a baby?" Katherine lifted her chin. "My husband staked this claim last year. Her voice faltered slightly. He passed before our son was born." Something shifted in the man's expression, sympathy, perhaps, or understanding. "I'm sorry to hear that." He glanced around at the property, the small vegetable garden showing signs of neglect, the woodpile running low, the sagging corner of the cabin roof. "I was a friend of Samuel Hayes," he said quietly. Catherine's eyes widened. You knew Samuel. Liam nodded. Not well. We worked the same cattle drive north from Texas 2 years back. Good man. Talked about settling here, finding a wife. His eyes softened as they rested on the baby. Looks like he managed both before he was taken. Katherine swallowed the lump in her throat. Yes. What's the boy's name? Liam asked, his voice gentle. He doesn't. Katherine hesitated. I haven't settled on one yet. Liam studied the child for a long moment, then looked back at Katherine. Matthew, he said softly. He looks like a Matthew. The baby, who had been fussing, suddenly quieted at the sound of the name, his eyes seeming to focus on the stranger. Matthew, Katherine repeated, testing the name on her tongue. It felt right somehow, though she couldn't say why. It was Samuel's father's name. I know, Liam said. He mentioned it once around the campfire, said if he ever had a son, that's what he'd name him. A tear slipped down Katherine's cheek before she could stop it. She quickly brushed it away, embarrassed by this display of weakness in front of a stranger. Mrs. Hayes, Liam said, replacing his hat, I'm headed into town for supplies. Can I bring you anything? Pride warred with practicality in Katherine's mind. Her supplies were running low, but she hesitated to accept charity. I can manage, Mr. Keller. He nodded, respecting her decision, and turned to mount his horse. He paused with one foot in the stirrup. I'll be staying in town for a few days. Sheriff Donnelly knows me if you change your mind. Katherine watched him ride away. The baby Matthew, she thought with a strange certainty gurgling against her shoulder. For the first time in months, she felt less alone. The next morning, Katherine woke to the sound of chopping. She bolted upright in bed, heart pounding, and quickly checked on Matthew in his cradle beside her. The baby slept peacefully despite the rhythmic thwack of an axe splitting wood. She dressed hastily and peered out the window to see Liam Keller methodically working through her pile of unsplit logs, creating a substantial stack of firewood. His coat was slung over the fence, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing muscular forearms as he worked. Katherine stepped onto the porch, Matthew now awake and in her arms. Mr. Keller, she called, what are you doing? He paused, wiping sweat from his brow with his forearm. Good morning, Mrs. Hayes. Hope I didn't wake you too early. Thought I'd make myself useful. I didn't ask for your help, she said, though without real anger. No, madam, you didn't. He swung the axe again, cleanly splitting another log. But that roof needs patching before the summer storms hit, and your wood pile was getting low. Katherine felt a mixture of gratitude and irritation. I can't pay you, not asking for payment. He continued working, just being neighborly. We're not neighbors. Liam paused again, leaning on the axe handle. Everyone's a neighbor out here, Mrs. Hayes. Too much space and too few people not to look out for each other. Katherine bounced Matthew gently as he began to fuss. Why are you really here, Mr. Keller? He straightened, his expression serious. Like I said, I knew your husband. Not well, but enough to respect him. When I rode into Silverdale yesterday and heard his widow was trying to keep his homestead going alone with a newborn, he shrugged. Seemed like the decent thing to check on you. And now that you have, now I see a roof that needs mending, a garden that needs tending, and stock that needs feeding. He gestured toward her 2 milk cows in the small chicken coop. Hard work for anyone, let alone a new mother on her own. Katherine wanted to bristle at his assessment, but exhaustion tugged at her. The truth was, she had been barely managing even the most essential tasks. I brought supplies, Liam continued. nodding toward his horse where saddlebags bulged with packages. Flour, coffee, sugar, some penny nails for that roof. Sheriff vouched for me, as I said he would. You can ask him yourself next time you're in town. Katherine shifted Matthew to her other arm, studying the stranger. He didn't have the look of a drifter. His clothes were worn, but clean. His manner direct but respectful. There was something in the way he carried himself that spoke of reliability, of solidity. One day, she said finally, you can stay one day and help with the roof. Then I expect you to move on, Mr. Keller. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Yes, madam. He returned to his work, the steady rhythm of the axe filling the morning air. True to his word. Liam spent the day repairing her roof, chopping enough wood to last weeks, and even managing to mend the chicken coop's broken door. He worked efficiently and without complaint, speaking only when spoken to, respectful of the boundaries Katherine had established. As dusk approached, Katherine found herself reluctant to see him go. It had been months since she'd had adult conversation, and despite her initial wariness, there was something comforting about his presence. I made supper, she said as he gathered his tools. The least I can do is feed you before you head back to town. Surprise and pleasure flickered across his features. That's kind of you, Mrs. Hayes. I'd be grateful. They ate at her small table, a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and the last of her preserved peaches. Matthew lay in his cradle nearby, occasionally making soft cooing sounds that drew Liam's attention. He's a good baby, Liam observed. Strong. Katherine nodded, a small smile touching her lips. He is. Hardly cries except when he's hungry or needs changing. He has your eyes, Liam said, then looked embarrassed at his own observation. Katherine felt warmth rise to her cheeks. Thank you. I think so too, though everyone says it's too early to tell. How long have you been in Wyoming territory? Liam asked, changing the subject. Just over a year. Samuel and I came west after we married in Pennsylvania. He had such dreams for this place. She looked around the modest cabin. He was going to build us a proper house once the claim was established. Plant an orchard over on that southern slope. Good land for it, Liam agreed. Gets the right amount of sun. You know about orchards? My father had apple trees back in Missouri. Taught me a fair bit about farming before I got the itch to see more of the country. His eyes took on a faraway look. Been riding the trails for nearly 10 years now. Worked ranches from Texas to Montana. And now? Katherine asked. Liam shrugged. Been thinking it might be time to put down roots. Getting too old for the trail drives. Katherine studied him in the lamplight. He couldn't be much past 30, the lines at the corners of his eyes speaking more of sun exposure than age. What will you do with this place? Liam asked, his tone careful. Katherine sighed. I don't know. The neighboring rancher, Mr. Thornton, offered to buy it, but for far less than it's worth. He knows I'm in a difficult position. Liam's jaw tightened. Thornton has a reputation for expanding his holdings that way. I don't want to sell, Katherine admitted. This was Samuel's dream. And now it's all Matthew will have of his father. Liam nodded slowly. It's good land. With the right help, it could be everything your husband envisioned. Help is something I'm short on, Mr. Keller. Their eyes met across the table, and something unspoken passed between them. Liam broke the gaze first, rising to his feet. I should get back to town before it's fully dark. Katherine stood as well. Thank you for your help today, truly. At the door, Liam paused, hat in hand. Mrs. Hayes, I know you said one day, but I'd like to come back tomorrow. That north fence line needs mending, and your garden could use some attention if you're to have vegetables this summer." Katherine should have refused. Logic and caution dictated she should politely decline and send this man on his way. Yet the thought of facing tomorrow alone again weighed heavily. "All right," she heard herself say. "Tomorrow." Tomorrow stretched into 3 days, then a week. Each morning, Liam would ride up just after sunrise, work through the day on the endless tasks a homestead required, share a simple supper with Katherine, and then ride back to town. He never presumed, never overstepped, but his steady presence began to feel like a lifeline to Katherine. On the 8th day, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Matthew asleep in Katherine's arms, Liam finally broached the subject that had been hovering between them. "I have a proposition, Mrs. Hayes." Katherine tensed slightly. "Oh?" "I've been saving to buy land of my own. Not enough yet for a place this size, but enough to get started." He looked out over the fields that stretched toward the distant mountains. "What if I were to work this land with you? As partners, I'd provide the labor and half the costs of supplies and seed. We'd share the profits." Katherine stared at him, stunned by the unexpected proposal. "You want to be my business partner?" "Yes, madam. I'd build my own cabin on the north end of the property, keep things proper." His eyes met hers, earnest and clear. "This is good land, Katherine. Too good to lose to Thornton's cattle operation. Your husband had the right idea about what it could be." "Why would you do this?" Katherine asked, genuinely perplexed. "You hardly know me." Liam was quiet for a moment. "I've been roaming for a long time, seen a lot of country, worked for a lot of men, never found a place that felt right to put down roots." He gestured to the land around them. "Something about this valley feels like it could be home, and something about you and that boy feels like—" He trailed off, seeming embarrassed by his near admission. "Like what?" Katherine pressed gently. "Like maybe I was meant to ride past your place that day." His voice was soft, almost a whisper. Katherine felt her heart quicken. It had been so long since she'd allowed herself to think beyond mere survival, beyond the next day or the next meal. "I'll need to think about it," she said finally. "It's a big decision." Liam nodded. "Of course. I'll be in town until the end of the week. After that, I'd have to move on to find work for the summer." The thought of him leaving created an unexpected hollow feeling in Katherine's chest. She realized with some surprise how much she had come to rely on his steady presence, his quiet strength. That night, after Liam had ridden back to town, Katherine sat by Matthew's cradle, watching her son's peaceful sleep. "What should we do, little one?" she whispered. "Your papa would want us to keep his dream alive, but can we trust Mr. Keller?" Matthew's only response was a soft sigh as he slept, his tiny fingers curled into fists. Katherine thought of Samuel, of his bright plans for their future, of the love that had brought her west to this wild, beautiful land, and she thought of Liam Keller with his calloused hands and kind eyes, the way he spoke Matthew's name with a reverence that made her heart ache. The next morning, she woke with clarity. When Liam rode up, she was waiting on the porch, Matthew in her arms. "I've thought about your proposal," she said without preamble. Liam dismounted, his expression guarded but hopeful. "And?" "I have conditions," Katherine stated firmly. "We'll draw up a proper contract. If either of us wants to dissolve the partnership after a year, we'll agree on fair terms now." A slow smile spread across Liam's face. "That sounds sensible. And you'll build your cabin where you said on the north end, and we'll keep our arrangement." "Strictly business." Liam's eyes softened. "Of course, Mrs. Hayes, I wouldn't presume otherwise." Then I accept your proposition, Mr. Keller. Partners. She shifted Matthew to extend her hand. Liam removed his glove and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and rough against her skin, his grip firm but gentle. Partners, he agreed. In that moment, as the morning sun spilled golden across the valley, Katherine felt something she hadn't experienced since Samuel's death. Hope. The summer of 1876 unfolded with relentless work and gradual change. True to his word, Liam built a small but sturdy cabin on the northern edge of the property, spending his days working alongside Katherine to bring the homestead back to life. Together, they repaired fences, expanded the garden, and prepared for their first modest harvest. News from the east trickled slowly to Silverdale reports of the nation's centennial celebrations, of Custer's defeat at Little Bighorn, of the continuing struggles of Reconstruction. But on the Hayes homestead, their world narrowed to more immediate concerns: the weather, the crops, the daily needs of survival on the frontier. Katherine watched Matthew grow stronger each day, marveling at his developing personality. He had Samuel's chin and her own stubborn determination, evident even at such a young age, and increasingly, she found herself watching Liam too, the careful way he handled her son, the respect with which he treated her opinions, the quiet competence with which he approached every task. By August, when the first vegetables were ready for harvest, they had fallen into a comfortable routine. Katherine tended to Matthew and the domestic aspects of the homestead, while Liam managed the heavier outdoor work, though she often joined him in the fields when Matthew napped. One evening, as they sat shelling peas on the porch, Katherine noticed Liam watching Matthew, who was now attempting to crawl across the wooden boards. "You're good with him," she observed. Liam smiled, genuine and unguarded. "He makes it easy, smart little fellow." "He trusts you," Katherine said softly. "Children can sense good people, I think." Liam's eyes met hers, and something unspoken passed between them, a current of feeling neither was ready to name. He looked away first, returning his attention to the peas. "I rode into Cheyenne last week," he said, changing the subject. "Found a buyer for our vegetables when they're all harvested. Better price than the general store here offers." "That's wonderful news." Katherine felt a surge of pride. Their partnership was working against all odds. Also heard about a new strain of apple trees that might do well in this soil. Thought maybe next spring we could start that orchard your husband dreamed of. Katherine's hands stilled. "You'd do that?" Liam nodded, his expression serious. "I made a promise to help make this place what Samuel envisioned. I aim to keep it." "Why?" The question slipped out before Katherine could stop it. Liam was quiet for a long moment. "Because he can't," he said simply, "and because you and Matthew deserve the home he wanted to give you." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them away quickly. "Thank you," she whispered. The harvest came in better than they dared hope, providing enough to store for winter and sell for a modest profit. As autumn painted the surrounding hills with gold and crimson, Katherine found herself thinking less about mere survival and more about the future. Matthew was growing so quickly, now pulling himself up on furniture and babbling constantly, and Liam had become essential. Not just for his labor or his contributions to the homestead, but for his presence in their lives. He read to Matthew in the evening sometimes, holding the boy on his knee and pointing to pictures in the one children's book Katherine had brought west. He brought wildflowers for the table and taught Katherine to identify edible plants in the surrounding woods. He never spoke of leaving, and she never asked about his plans beyond their agreement. The first snow fell in late October, earlier than usual, according to the townspeople. Katherine watched from the window as Liam trudged through the white drifts, bringing firewood to her porch and checking on the animals in the barn. "Looks like we're in for a real winter," he said when he came inside, stomping snow from his boots. His cheeks were red from the cold, his breath visible in the chilly air. "Will your cabin be warm enough?" Katherine asked, concerned. The structure was sound but small, with only a basic stone fireplace. "I've weathered worse," Liam assured her, accepting the cup of coffee she offered. His fingers brushed hers as he took the cup, and neither acknowledged the way they both lingered a moment too long. Matthew, now able to pull himself along the furniture, reached for Liam from his play area near the fire. He called, his favorite sound these days. Liam chuckled and scooped him up. "Hello there, partner. Keeping an eye on things for me?" Katherine felt her heart contract at the sight of them together, her son's tiny hand patting Liam's bearded cheek, Liam's gentle smile as he bounced the boy on his knee. "I should get to back," Liam said after a while, setting Matthew down carefully. "Need to bring in more wood for my own place before this storm gets worse." "Liam," Katherine said as he reached for his coat, "why don't you stay here tonight? The weather's turning bad, and your cabin's a fair walk in the snow." He stilled, his back to her. "That wouldn't be proper, Katherine," she swallowed. "You can take the rocking chair by the fire. I'd feel better knowing you were safe, not trying to keep warm alone in that small cabin." Liam turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Are you sure?" Katherine nodded. "As a friend, as our partner." Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment perhaps, or resignation. "All right, thank you." That night, with the wind howling outside and snow piling against the windows, Katherine lay awake listening to Liam's deep, steady breathing from across the room. Matthew slept peacefully in his cradle beside her bed, occasionally making soft noises in his sleep. Katherine realized with startling clarity that this was what she wanted not just for tonight, but for all nights. The three of them together, safe and warm, against the wilderness outside. The knowledge terrified her. She had loved Samuel deeply, had mourned him completely. The idea of opening her heart again, of risking such pain, seemed almost unthinkable. And yet, as she drifted finally toward sleep, it was Liam's presence that comforted her, Liam's protection that allowed her to rest. The blizzard lasted 3 days, forcing Liam to remain in Katherine's cabin. They established careful boundaries. He slept by the fire. She kept to her curtained-off bedroom with Matthew. During daylight, they played with the baby, read from Katherine's small collection of books, and discussed plans for spring planting. On the 4th day, when the storm finally broke, Katherine felt an irrational disappointment as Liam prepared to return to his own cabin. "I'll check the animals, make sure everything survived the storm," he said, pulling on his heavy coat. "We'll be fine now," Katherine assured him, though she didn't quite meet his eyes. Liam paused at the door. "Katherine," he said softly, "thank you for your hospitality." She nodded, suddenly unable to speak around the lump in her throat. The winter settled into a rhythm after that. Liam would come each morning to help with chores, sometimes staying for meals, but always returning to his cabin before nightfall. They rarely spoke of personal matters anymore, focusing instead on the practical aspects of their partnership. Christmas approached, bringing with it memories Katherine had been trying to suppress. Her first Christmas with Samuel had been in this cabin, simple but joyful, full of plans for their future. This year would be Matthew's first Christmas, and the thought of celebrating without Samuel brought a fresh wave of grief. A week before Christmas, Liam arrived with a small pine tree strapped to his horse. "Thought the little one might like some greenery in the house," he said gruffly, avoiding Catherine's surprised gaze. Together they set up the tree in the corner of the cabin, using Catherine's few ornaments, a paper star, some dried berries strung on thread, and a single glass ball that had been her mother's. "It's beautiful," she said when they finished. "Thank you, Liam." He shrugged, embarrassed by her gratitude. Just a tree. But it was more than that, and they both knew it. It was a gesture of caring, of understanding what she needed without being told. On Christmas Eve, Katherine invited Liam for supper. She had saved precious sugar and dried fruit for a special cake, and even managed to find a small wooden horse in the general store for Matthew. Liam arrived with gifts of his own, a carved wooden rattle for Matthew, and, to Catherine's surprise, a delicate silver hairpin. "It's not much," he said as she unwrapped it, "but I saw it in Cheyenne last time I was there. Reminded me of you somehow." Katherine touched the simple adornment, moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "It's beautiful, Liam. Thank you." They ate by lamplight, Matthew already asleep after the excitement of his first Christmas celebrations. The cabin felt warm and safe. Decorated with pine boughs and lit by candles Katherine had been saving for a special occasion. "I've been thinking," Liam said as they sat by the fire after the meal, "about our arrangement." Katherine tensed. "Oh?" "We agreed to reassess after a year. That would be come spring." He stared into the flames, not meeting her eyes. "I want you to know that I'm satisfied with our partnership, more than satisfied." Relief flooded through her. "I am too, Liam. You've been invaluable." He nodded slowly. "Good. That's good." He seemed to want to say more, but instead rose to his feet. "I should head back before it gets any later. The moon's bright enough to light the way." At the door, he turned back. "Merry Christmas, Katherine." "Merry Christmas, Liam." After he left, Katherine stood at the window watching his figure move through the moonlit snow toward his cabin. The hairpin felt heavy in her pocket, weighted with meanings she wasn't ready to confront. January brought bitter cold and more snow. February brought illness, a fever that swept through Silverdale, taking the very young and the very old. Katherine watched with growing fear as Matthew began to cough, his little body burning with fever. Liam rode through a snowstorm to fetch the doctor from town, returning with an elderly man who examined Matthew with gentle hands. "Keep him warm. Keep getting fluids into him," Dr. Winters instructed. "The fever needs to break on its own. I'll leave some willow bark tea that might help." For 3 days and nights, Katherine barely slept, keeping vigil by Matthew's cradle. Liam refused to leave, taking shifts watching the baby so Katherine could rest briefly. On the 4th night, as they sat together by the fire, Matthew's labored breathing the only sound in the room, Katherine finally broke. "I can't lose him too," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I can't bear it, Liam." Liam moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her cold hands in his. "You won't lose him. Matthew is strong, just like his mother. If anything happens to him, it won't," Liam said firmly. "I promise you, Katherine." She looked into his eyes, seeing the conviction there, the strength she had come to rely on. Without thinking, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, seeking comfort in his closeness. Liam remained perfectly still, his breathing shallow. Then, slowly, he raised one hand to cup her cheek, his thumb gently wiping away her tears. "Rest," he murmured. "I'll watch over him." Katherine nodded, too exhausted to argue. She retreated to her bed, leaving Liam sitting beside Matthew's cradle, his large hand resting protectively on the edge. She woke hours later to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of soft singing. Liam sat in the rocking chair, Matthew in his arms, singing a low, gentle tune Katherine didn't recognize. The baby was awake, his eyes clear for the first time in days, watching Liam's face with fascination. "His fever broke during the night," Liam said when he noticed Katherine watching them. "Doctor was right, he just needed time." Katherine crossed the room in 3 quick steps and touched Matthew's forehead. Cool, blessedly cool. Relief crashed through her like a wave, leaving her knees weak. She sank to the floor beside the rocking chair, laying her head against Liam's knee as tears of gratitude flowed freely. Without hesitation, Liam's hand came to rest on her hair, strong and steadying. They remained that way for a long time, the 3 of them together in the morning light, connected by something deeper than words. March arrived with the first hints of spring. The snow began to recede, revealing muddy earth beneath. New life stirred everywhere, crocuses pushing through the soil, birds returning from their winter absence, calves being born on neighboring ranches. Matthew, fully recovered from his illness, was now pulling himself up and attempting his first steps, falling often, but always trying again with stubborn determination. Just like his mother, Liam observed one afternoon as they watched the baby's efforts. Katherine smiled. And his father, too. Samuel never gave up on anything once he set his mind to it. Liam nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Tell me about him, about Samuel." Katherine looked surprised. They rarely spoke of her late husband. "Why?" "Because he was important to you. Because he's Matthew's father." Liam's gaze was steady. "Because I want to know." So Katherine told him about meeting Samuel at a church social back east, about his dreams of the West and his gentle persistence in courting her, about his laugh and his kindness and the way he'd looked at her like she was the most precious thing he'd ever seen. Liam listened without interrupting, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts. "He sounds like a fine man," he said when she finished. "Matthew will be proud to carry his name." "Yes," Katherine agreed softly, "though sometimes I worry that Matthew will never know him, that stories and a few possessions are all he'll have." Liam was quiet for a moment. "A boy needs a father," he said finally, "someone to teach him to ride and shoot, to show him how to be a good man." Katherine felt her heart quicken at his words, at the unspoken question beneath them. "Yes," she said carefully, "he does." Their eyes met, and this time neither looked away. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and unspoken feelings. Matthew chose that moment to take his first true steps, tottering 3 wobbly paces from the chair to Katherine's knees before falling with a delighted giggle. They both laughed, the tension broken, but something had shifted between them. An acknowledgement perhaps of what they had become to each other, of what they might yet be. April brought planting season and increased activity on the homestead. Liam and Katherine worked side by side, preparing the fields, expanding the garden, and building a better chicken coop. They spoke of practical matters, which crops to plant, whether to invest in more livestock, how to improve irrigation from the creek that ran along the western edge of the property. They did not speak of the year mark of their partnership, now past, or of any change to their arrangement. Neither seemed willing to broach the subject first. It was Sheriff Donnelly who finally forced the issue when he rode out to the homestead one sunny afternoon in late April. "Mrs. Hayes," he greeted Katherine, tipping his hat. "Keller, fine day." "What brings you all the way out here, Sheriff?" Liam asked, setting down the fence post he'd been preparing to place. Donnelly dismounted, his expression uneasy. Got some news you should know about. Ryder came through town yesterday, says he knows you, Keller. Man named Bradshaw. Liam stiffened visibly. Jack Bradshaw? That's the one. Said he worked a ranch with you in Colorado some years back. What did he want? Liam's voice had gone flat, emotionless. Was asking about you. Seemed mighty interested in your situation out here. The sheriff glanced at Katherine. Mentioned something about you having a wife back in Nebraska. Said you'd run out on her and a couple of kids. Katherine felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. She turned to Liam, unable to mask her shock. Is that true? Liam's face had gone pale, his eyes hard. No, it's not true. Bradshaw seemed pretty convinced, Donnelly pressed. Said he'd seen the woman himself, that she was looking for you. Jack Bradshaw is a liar and a thief, Liam said, his voice tight with controlled anger. We worked together at the Double B Ranch in '70. I caught him stealing from the owner, reported him. He was fired and nearly jailed. He's had a grudge against me ever since. Donnelly studied him carefully. So there's no wife? No children? No, Liam stated firmly. I've never been married. Katherine felt relief wash through her, followed immediately by shame at how quickly she had doubted him. Where is Bradshaw now? Liam asked. Left town this morning. Said he'd be back, though. Donnelly replaced his hat. Thought you should know. Man seemed to have a real hatred for you, Keller. After the sheriff departed, an uncomfortable silence fell between Katherine and Liam. They returned to their work, the easy companionship of the morning shattered. That evening, as Katherine prepared supper, she finally spoke. I'm sorry I doubted you. Liam looked up from where he sat on the floor, building a block tower with Matthew. You had reason to question. You hardly know me. The words stung, all the more because they contained a kernel of truth. Despite months of working side by side, living as neighbors, even weathering a crisis together, there remained walls between them, parts of themselves they hadn't shared. I know enough, Katherine said softly. I know you're a good man. I know I trust you with my son's life and my own. Liam's expression softened. He stood, leaving Matthew happily demolishing the block tower. Katherine, he began, then hesitated. Yes? There's something I should have told you. About how I knew Samuel. Katherine tensed. What is it? It wasn't just one cattle drive. We worked together for nearly a year. We were friends. Liam's eyes held hers steadily. When he got sick, he wrote to me, asked me to check on you if I was ever passing through these parts. Katherine stared at him, stunned. Samuel asked you to find me? Liam nodded. The letter reached me months after he passed. I didn't come right away, didn't want to intrude on your grief. But when I was heading north this spring, I remembered his request. So you didn't just happen to be passing by? Katherine said slowly, trying to process this revelation. You came here deliberately. To check on me. Yes. Why didn't you tell me this before? Liam ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. At first, I didn't want you to feel obligated in any way. Then, as time went on, he shook his head. It never seemed the right moment. Katherine turned away, her mind racing. All these months she had believed their meeting was chance, perhaps even fate. To learn it had been arranged by Samuel from beyond the grave stirred complex emotions, gratitude, confusion, even a flicker of betrayal. What else was in the letter? She asked, not looking at him. He wrote about you, about how much he loved you, about his hopes for the baby. Liam's voice was gentle. He asked me to make sure you were all right, that's all. Not to stay, not to... He trailed off. Not to what? Katherine turned back to face him. Liam met her gaze steadily. Not to fall in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. Katherine felt her heart hammering against her ribs. And did you? She whispered. Liam took a step toward her. I tried not to, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. God knows I tried. Katherine couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All these months of carefully maintained boundaries, of denying the growing feelings between them, had led to this moment. Katherine, Liam said, stopping just short of touching her, I need to know if you want me to go. Our year's agreement is up. If you want to dissolve our partnership, I'll understand. I'll move on. Find work elsewhere. The thought of him leaving, of returning to the isolation she'd known before his arrival, was suddenly unbearable. No, she said quickly. I don't want that. Relief flickered across his features. What do you want, then? It was a simple question with an enormously complex answer. Katherine glanced at Matthew, contently playing on the floor, then back at Liam, this man who had become so essential to their lives, who had respected her boundaries and her grief, who had never pushed for more than she was ready to give. I want, she began, then faltered, the words sticking in her throat. A knock at the door startled them both. Liam turned, his hand instinctively moving toward the gun at his hip. Mrs. Hayes, a woman's voice called. It's Widow Jensen from town. I've brought that yarn I promised you. The moment shattered like glass. Katherine stepped back, smoothing her apron with trembling hands. Just a moment, she called, then looked at Liam, an apology in her eyes. He nodded in understanding, moving to gather Matthew and his toys from the floor. I should head back to my cabin anyway. It's getting late. And just like that, the words that had been about to spill from Katherine's heart remained unspoken, suspended in the space between them. May brought warmer weather and longer days. The crops they had planted began to emerge in neat rows, promising a good harvest if the weather held. Matthew took his first confident steps and began attempting words, mama, and up, and to Katherine's mixed emotions, Lee for Liam. The tension that had sprung up between them after their interrupted conversation gradually eased, though neither made any attempt to revisit the subject. They worked together during the days, shared occasional meals, and maintained their separate dwellings. Until the night the raiders came. Katherine woke to the sound of shouting and the orange glow of flames through a window. She bolted from bed, snatched Matthew from his cradle, and peered outside to see the barn ablaze, 3 mounted men circling the structure. "Keller!" one of them shouted. "Come out and face me like a man." Katherine recognized the voice with a chill. Jack Bradshaw, the man Sheriff Donnelly had warned them about. She knew Liam would have heard the commotion and would be coming from his cabin. He would be outnumbered, outgunned. Without hesitation, she grabbed Samuel's old rifle from above the door and loaded it with shaking hands. "Stay here, my love," she whispered to Matthew, placing him in the center of her bed, surrounded by pillows to prevent him from falling. "Mama will be right back." Heart pounding, she slipped out the back door of the cabin and circled wide, using the shadows and her knowledge of the property to remain unseen. She could hear Bradshaw still calling taunts, could see the other 2 men spreading out, searching. "Burning a man's barn is a coward's move, Jack." Liam's voice suddenly rang out from the darkness. "But then, you always were a coward." "Says the man hiding in the dark," Bradshaw snarled. "I've been tracking you for months, Keller. Time to settle our score." Katherine moved carefully into position, the rifle steady in her hands despite her fear. Samuel had taught her to shoot, insisting it was a necessary skill on the frontier. She had never imagined using that skill against men, but she would do whatever necessary to protect her home, her son, and Liam. A shot rang out, followed by the sound of splintering wood. One of Bradshaw's men had fired toward Liam's voice. "You missed," Liam called, his voice now from a different location. He was moving, Katherine realized, drawing them away from the cabins, away from Matthew. In the flickering light of the burning barn, Katherine caught a glimpse of one of the raiders dismounting, creeping toward the shadow where Liam's voice had come from. Without hesitation, she aimed and fired. The man cried out, clutching his leg as he fell. His horse bolted at the sound of the shot. "What the hell?" Bradshaw shouted, wheeling his horse around, searching for the source of the shot. Katherine had already moved, circling to a new position. In the confusion, she saw Liam emerge from the shadows behind the second raider, dragging him from his horse and delivering a blow that left the man motionless on the ground. Now it was just Bradshaw, turning his horse in frantic circles, his gun swinging wildly as he tried to locate his enemies in the darkness. "Give it up, Jack," Liam called, now standing in the open, his own gun trained on the man. "You're alone now." "Not quite alone," Katherine said, stepping into the light, her rifle aimed squarely at Bradshaw's chest. The man's eyes widened as he took in the scene, his two companions down, himself caught in a crossfire. "This isn't over, Keller," he snarled, but there was fear in his voice now. "Yes, it is," Liam replied calmly. "Drop your gun and get off your horse, or the lady will put a hole in you. She's already wounded your friend there, and she wasn't even trying to kill him." Bradshaw hesitated, his eyes darting between them. For a moment, Katherine thought he might risk a shot, but then he slowly lowered his weapon and dismounted. "Tie him up," Katherine told Liam. "I'll check on Matthew and then fetch the sheriff." The aftermath was a blur of activity. The sheriff arriving with deputies, the wounded raider being treated by Dr. Winters, statements being taken, the still smoldering barn being doused with water from the creek. By dawn, Bradshaw and his men were locked in the Silverdale jail, awaiting transport to Cheyenne to face charges of arson, attempted murder, and various other crimes Sheriff Donnelly seemed delighted to enumerate. Katherine and Liam stood surveying the damage as the sun rose. The barn was a total loss, though thankfully the animals had escaped unharmed. Matthew slept peacefully in Katherine's arms, exhausted after the night's excitement. "You saved my life," Liam said quietly, taking that shot, drawing their attention. Katherine shook her head. "We saved each other." They were silent for a moment, watching as the first rays of sunlight illuminated the charred remains of the barn. "I'll rebuild it," Liam said, stronger than before. Katherine turned to look at him, really look at him, taking in the soot on his face, the determination in his eyes, the strength in his stance despite his exhaustion. "Liam," she said softly. He met her gaze, and whatever he saw there made him go very still. "I need to tell you what I was going to say yesterday, before we were interrupted." Her voice was steady, despite the hammering of her heart. "I wanted to tell you that I don't just want you to stay as my partner." Liam took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cool morning air. "What do you want, Katherine?" he asked, echoing his question from the day before. "I want a father for Matthew," she said simply, "and a husband for myself." Joy bloomed across Liam's face, transforming his features. "Are you asking me to marry you, Katherine Hayes?" A smile tugged at her lips. "I believe I am, Liam Keller." He reached out, gently touching her cheek with calloused fingers. "I've loved you since the moment I saw you hanging laundry with your baby nearby, looking so fierce and so afraid all at once. I loved you before I even knew your name." Katherine leaned into his touch. "I think perhaps Samuel knew what he was doing, sending you to us." "He was a wise man," Liam agreed softly. "So is that a yes?" Katherine asked, suddenly shy. In answer, Liam leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, a gentle kiss that held the promise of a lifetime. Matthew stirred between them, reaching out a small hand to pat Liam's cheek. Liam pulled back with a laugh, taking the baby's hand in his own. "I believe that's a yes from both of us, little man," he said, his voice thick with emotion. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Silverdale, with Matthew toddling down the aisle ahead of them, clutching a ring tied to a ribbon. Sheriff Donnelly stood as witness, along with Mrs. Jensen and Dr. Winters, who had become friends through the Winters trials. That evening, as dusk settled over their homestead, no longer the Hayes claim, but now the Keller family farm, Katherine watched from the porch as Liam played with Matthew in the yard, the boys' delighted laughter carrying on the spring breeze. When Matthew tired and came to rest against Katherine's knee, Liam joined them on the porch, sitting beside his new wife with an arm around her shoulders. "Happy?" he asked softly. Katherine nodded, leaning into his embrace. "I never thought I could be again, after Samuel. Never thought I'd find love twice in one lifetime." "Some people are just that lucky," Liam said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "It wasn't luck," Katherine disagreed. "It was Samuel's last gift to us, to Matthew and me." Liam looked thoughtful. "Maybe to me as well. He gave me the family I never thought I'd have." As if understanding he was being discussed, Matthew clambered into Liam's lap, patting his face with small hands. "Pa," he said clearly, surprising them both. "Pa!" Tears welled in Liam's eyes as he gathered the boy close. "That's right, son," he whispered. "I'm your pa now." Katherine watched them together, these two who had become her whole world, and felt a sense of rightness settle deep in her soul. Her baby had been born fatherless, but fate, or perhaps Samuel's guiding hand, had sent Liam Keller to whisper Matthew's name and claim them both as his own. The years that followed brought both joy and hardship, as years on the frontier inevitably did. The barn was rebuilt, larger and stronger than before. The orchard Samuel had dreamed of was planted on the southern slope, and though it would be years before it bore significant fruit, the sight of the young trees taking root gave Katherine a profound sense of continuity, of building something that would outlast them all. Matthew grew into a sturdy, curious boy, with his mother's thoughtful nature and his stepfather's easy laugh. He showed a natural affinity for horses and spent hours with Liam, learning to ride and care for the small herd they gradually acquired. In the spring of 1878, Katherine gave birth to a daughter they named Emma, with Liam pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door while Mrs. Fra Jensen assisted with the delivery. When he was finally allowed in to see his wife and newborn daughter, Liam wept openly, overwhelmed by the miracle of this new life they had created together. Matthew, not quite 3, approached his baby sister with solemn curiosity. "Mine?" he asked, touching her tiny hand with gentle fingers. "Yes," Katherine told him, smiling through her own tears. "She's yours to help protect and love, just as Papa and I protect and love you." As their family grew with twin boys, Samuel and James, arriving in 1880, so did their homestead. The original claim expanded as they gradually purchased adjoining land. Liam's skill with horses led to a successful breeding operation, while Katherine's careful management of their finances ensured stability even in difficult years. They never forgot Samuel, keeping his memory alive for Matthew through stories and the few possessions Katherine had saved: his Bible, his pocket watch, the plans he'd drawn for the orchard that now flourished on the hillside. "He gave me my first father's love," Liam told Matthew on his 10th birthday as they sat together beneath the apple trees. "By entrusting you and your mother to me, he taught me what it means to be a father. That's a gift I can never repay." Matthew, growing thoughtful as he approached adolescence, considered this carefully. "Do you think he would mind that you're my father now?" Liam shook his head. "Your mother and I believe he guided me here specifically for that purpose. Love isn't diminished by being shared, son. Your father, Samuel, gave you life, gave you your name. I'm just helping to finish the work he started." This explanation satisfied Matthew, who carried both men in his heart, the father of his blood and the father of his daily life, each essential in different ways. By 1890, as Wyoming prepared for statehood, the Keller Ranch had become one of the most prosperous in the county. Matthew, now a young man of 14, worked alongside Liam with increasing responsibility. Emma, at 12, had her mother's determination and her father's way with horses. The twins, 10 years old and inseparable, were already showing aptitude for different aspects of ranch life. Samuel for animal husbandry, James for the mechanics of the increasingly modernized equipment. On summer evenings, the family often gathered on the wide porch of the large, comfortable house that had replaced both original cabins. Katherine and Liam would sit side by side in matching rocking chairs, watching their children and the sunset over land that had transformed through their shared vision and hard work. "Did you ever imagine this?" Katherine asked one such evening, her hand clasped in Liam's as it has been for 14 years of marriage. "That day you rode up and saw a widow hanging laundry with her fatherless baby?" Liam smiled, the lines at the corners of his eyes deepening with the expression. At 44, his dark hair was now streaked with silver, but his strength and steadiness remained unchanged. "I imagined something good might come of answering Samuel's request," he admitted. "But this," he gestured toward their 4 healthy children playing in the yard, the prosperous ranch stretching in all directions, the home they had built together. "This is beyond anything I could have dreamed." Katherine leaned her head against his shoulder, content in a way she had never thought possible during those dark days after Samuel's death. "I like to think he knows somehow, that he can see what his last letter created." "I believe he does," Liam said softly, "and I believe he's pleased with how his son turned out." They watched as Matthew, tall and straight-backed, helped Emma mount her favorite mare, his patience with his sister evident in every careful movement. "All our children," Katherine corrected gently. "They're all ours together, Liam, even Matthew." "Especially Matthew," Liam agreed. "He was the beginning of everything." As twilight deepened into night, the Keller family gathered inside their home, the lamps casting warm light through windows that had once seemed so lonely to a young widow. Now they glowed with the life of a family that had been forged not just by blood, but by choice, by love that had grown from the most unexpected beginnings. Katherine watched her husband helping the twins with their reading, Matthew discussing horse lineage with Emma, and felt the fullness of her heart might overflow. From loss had come abundance, from grief, joy beyond measure. And it had all begun with a stranger riding up to her homestead, a cowboy who had whispered her son's name, and in doing so had claimed them both for his own.